do that now.
Okay. Well, if you didn't see from my tagline there, I'm Susanna Prenovo. I am the AmeriCorps Washington Service Corps Volunteer Coordinator for the Nisqually Land Trust. And we are excited to have you here today, whether you're a current steward or whether it's your first time. We're gonna have a lot of information today about the land trust and how you can be a volunteer site steward with us. So I'm gonna toss it over to Courtney and let her introduce herself to you and take care of some technical stuff, information.
Yeah, I'm Courtney. I'm the stewardship assistant with the land trust. I'm gonna be helping out with the workshop today, both giving some information about invasive plant species you should watch out for, as well as trying to help with any like Zoom tech issues you may have. So if you have any questions either about technical issues or about any of the content of the site steward workshop, please put your question in the chat and I will be monitoring that. And I'll either like answer your question within the chat box or, you know, out loud if it's a question that like everybody should hear the answer to. Yeah, please keep yourselves muted. There might be some time at the end for like more of a live Q&A, but just stay muted unless told otherwise. And then I'm going to be assigning people to breakout rooms because we have like one component of the workshop that will be split into smaller rooms. So as I'm assigning you, and you probably will see a notification that says you've been assigned and an option to join the breakout room. Don't join the breakout room until you're instructed to join the breakout room. It would be really confusing if you did that because then we'd all be like in different spots. So yeah, if you see that notification, just ignore it until it's time to do that. Yeah, so again, have any questions, let me know. Do you want to introduce yourself, Addie?
Yes, hi, I'm Addie Schlossel. I'm the land steward at the Nisqually Land Trust. And I'll be chatting with you a little bit about our different properties, and I'm really happy to see all you guys here. Thanks for coming.
And also we are recording this. So, you know, if you prefer to keep your video off or turn it off now, that's fine. We do like to see your faces. That's fun, but understand if that's something, an option you don't want on there. It'll probably be sent out later to participants. That way, if there's something you wanted to review or see again, you'll have a chance to do that. So, all right. Well, I guess we'll get started. I'm going to share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint here to go through some information with you. So give me a second here to get that going. Get slideshow here. Here we go. All right. Okay, sometimes my computer's a little slow. I guess it's still waking up. Let me get it going. Here we go. Okay, can everybody see? I can't see everybody now, so let me see if I can.
Yep, we can see the presentation.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is the Nisqually Land Trust Site Steward Workshop. So here's our little logo, our front page. Our agenda here is our welcome and introductions. Oh, Courtney, did we want to do the little poll or do you want to do that later?
We can probably do it now if you want to pull up the polls, Addie. Yeah, we're going to just do, oh, somebody's waiting to enter. A poll. The first question is, where in the watershed are you from or near the watershed? I know not all of the options on the page are actually inside the watershed. And then the second question is just, how did you hear about this workshop? Just for our, you know, helpful information for us. Can people see the polls? I can't.
I can see it, yeah.
Okay.
I see answers coming in right now.
Yes, me too. It's kind of exciting. I like this. This is my first time to be on this end of it. Nice. We have a lot from Olympia so far coming in. A lot of our fellow group Mountaineers group is how they heard about it. Yay, Mountaineers.
Okay, maybe we can share the poll results later, but let's get into the rest of the workshop.
All right. Let's see. I gotta have this off of my screen. Okay. So we're going to go through the Nisqually Land Trust background and the basics of the land trust, then a little bit about what stewardship is and site stewards. Then we're going to go into performing a site steward visit, what you would do on your visit. We'll have a plant and wildlife ID presentation by Courtney, and then we have a special guest presenter for our bird ID presentation. And then we'll go into reporting your visit, optional tasks you can do during your visit. And Addie will go over our properties overview, and we'll have a time for questions, wrap up, and next steps. All right, so the basics. We were founded in 1989 to acquire and manage the critical lands to permanently benefit the water, wildlife, people of the Nisqually River watershed. Today, we steward close to 5,500 acres, and we help protect over 7,800 acres in the Nisqually watershed and marine nearshore area. And we were accredited in 2013. And our goal today is to introduce you to this program, the Site Steward Volunteer Program, which helps us to achieve this goal of managing and monitoring the land. All right. So the Nisqually River runs from the Nisqually Glacier, Mount Rainier National Park. You can see the pictures here down to the Delta on the Puget Sound and the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. And you've got some facts here at the bottom. The acreage of the watershed, the main stem of the river, 78 miles, 76% of the salmonoid accessible shoreline along main stem is permanently protected, and 42 river miles are accessible to the salmons. There's a map of the watershed. So we have some fee ownership, the acreage there, over 5,000 acreage of fee ownership. We also have some conservation easements. And then other projects, including association with the Nisqually Community Forest. And so that totals up to 7,811 acres protected as of this year, January this year. Our priority habitats in the watershed, these include mature forests, as you can see these pictures here. The river main stem, riparian forest, very important. That's a lot of what, when we're out there planting, we're planting to restore some of the riparian forest there along the river. The side channels and wetlands. And we have the nearshore bluffs and coastal lagoons with some of the property that we have on Anderson Island. And our work, we do lots of stewardship and restoration work thanks to our volunteers, as you can see in these pictures. This is a little invasive species control here with pulling Scotch broom with our weed wrenches. We do, right now we're in planting season, planting and maintaining riparian forest. As you can see here, a couple of our different properties out at Powell Creek and then at Anderson Island. We also do occasionally some removing of infrastructure and on the lands that we acquire, and garbage and debris removal. So all of these are open to volunteer help most of the time. Yeah, ecological thinning in some of our areas, up in Mount Rainier Gateway area. And then our partners, we have lots of partners, Puget Sound Acquisition and Restoration Fund, to the Nisqually River Foundation, the Education Project, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, all of these listed here. We're very thankful for all those partnerships that help us do this work. So basically, this is what we do. We monitor, we restore, and that all equals our stewardship of the land, caring for the habitat. Anything, Courtney or Addie, you would like to add before we go into this next section? Okay, so stewardship and site stewards. Stewardship is observing and reporting maintenance of the land and restoration. So we have this quote down below: when we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. And what is a site steward? A site steward is a volunteer who adopts land trust property and increases our capacity to track changes. Anyone can become a site steward. It helps us to satisfy our conservation obligations. Yeah, just looking at my notes real quick here. Yeah, and in order for us to stay accredited, to keep our accreditation as well, there must be monitoring of the lands. There's only 3 people on our stewardship team that are out on the land regularly, and we have a lot of land to track those changes on. So we really rely on our volunteer site stewards to help us with that, to let us know what's going on out there. Qualities of a site steward. You commit to volunteering for a year or more, can make up to 4 visits per year, ideally like once per season, once per quarter. You're willing to be an ambassador for the land trust, love to explore the outdoors, want to take responsibility for the land, and want to learn, or maybe you already have knowledge about Western Washington ecosystems. Why be a site steward? Again, it helps us satisfy our conservation obligations. It grows our written records of what's going on in the properties. It helps us to promptly discover any negative conditions, anything we need to go out and work on. Helps us maintain a positive relationship with our neighbors. It helps you in learning about the local ecosystem, and it's a chance for you to give back. Performing a site steward visit. So the things you would do when you're out doing a visit on one of the properties is you're gonna look, you're gonna listen, record the things that you see and hear, and report back to us. It's as easy as that. So in order to do that, you need to be prepared. I'm gonna communicate when and where, communicate to others where you're gonna be and when. Pack for the unexpected, make sure you have whatever you need while you're out exploring. Might be some bushwhacking to do, so make sure you have things like a first aid kit and water, maybe a snack, compass, and bring your binder. So as we get further into the presentation or next steps in being a site steward, you will be provided a binder that's going to give you all the information you need to perform your site visit. So make sure to bring that with you. And when you're out on the land, there's certain things that are allowed, public access allowed activities, and things that are discouraged. So some of the things that you can definitely do out on the land and that there's public access to do is walking, taking photographs, birding. Things that are a little restricted would be like harvesting on the land. You're only going to harvest what you can consume on site, and blackberry. And dogs, it depends on the site, whether or not your dog would be allowed to come with you. So you need to check on that. And when they are allowed, it would be on leash only. Prohibited. So things we don't want to see on our lands are not camping, fires, dumping, boating, hunting, anything that leaves an impact or prohibited activities. So going back to being an ambassador. So when you're out on Land Trust lands as a site steward, you're basically a friendly face directing others to appropriate staff. If you see something, you know, somebody's been camping or something out there, then, or somebody's asking you questions, maybe that's walking on the land, you can direct them to staff at the Land Trust because you're not responsible for confronting people who are acting illegally or involved in these activities that are not allowed. So you would just be the friendly face, letting them know who they can talk to or contact. And you're not responsible to be an expert on past or future land acquisition or land management activities. So you don't have to worry about confronting or anybody or doing anything like that. Bottom line is we don't want you to put yourself in any kind of perilous situation. So when in doubt, don't dish it out, basically is the saying there. So you're there to check on the lands and see what, you know, record, observe, enjoy the nature and report back to us what you see. So what you're gonna look for. You might look for property boundaries where practical. And so we've got little property boundary signs here in the picture, so you'll see those on the land. Known invasive species sites. So we're going to be doing some plant ID here in a little bit and pointing out what some of those invasive species are. And so you could mark or let us know where you see patches of invasive species. Evidence of wildlife activity, always good to know if you're seeing some wildlife on the land, what you see or the evidence of it. Also trails, old vehicle tracks like recreational vehicles. You know, if you see something like that on the land, culverts and bridges, fences and gates, common dump sites. There tends to be areas sometimes that, you know, regularly start to become a dump site. So knowing about reporting those is helpful to us. And previous campsites, those are some things you might look for. And that's it for my section. We're going to go into a plant ID, starting with some invasives, and Courtney's going to go into that for us.
Courtney, you are muted.
Yeah, I had a box open over my mute button. I was able to press it. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about some invasives that we find on our properties. It's really great to know your native plants as well, but we don't have time to cover all of that today, so we're going to focus on some invasives that you should be looking out for on your land trust site, as well as just around in the area. It's good to know. A lot of this information has been collected by a volunteer of ours named Crow. Crow has been a site steward for the Land Trust Ohop Creek site for over a decade. And for many years before that, she worked on a revegetation project there. Crow is drawn to the Ohop Valley for the wonderful birding opportunities it presents, because she is a very avid birder. Crow also volunteers with several other agencies, most notably Mount Rainier National Park, where she helps manage their volunteer program, and also hunts down and documents rare species, rare plant species for the park's Natural Resources Division. This is information from Crow. She's happy to say that she's added several species which previously had not been known to occur at Mount Rainier. And she also works with the Invasive Plant Council. So we've been very fortunate to have her as a resource over the years. Yeah, so a lot of the information I'm sharing comes from her. So yeah, let's get into it. Susanna, you can move to the next slide. So the first few species I'm going to talk about are very common invasives You're likely to see them on your land trust property, and you probably just see them all the time around town on hikes, that kind of thing. So first species I'm going to talk about is Scotch broom. I have included their scientific names. I'm not going to try to pronounce all of them. It's not what I'm great at. Anyway, Scotch broom is a plant that it originates in Scotland, as the name might suggest. It spreads very quickly in disturbed soil, such as old road beds or the side of roads, fields that used to be used for agriculture, construction sites, etc. It pretty effectively outcompetes most native species, and it's pretty hard to eradicate since it spreads so quickly, and its seeds can be dormant in the ground for a long time. So even if you pull it, it could resprout. So if you see it on your site, please let us know. It's a invasive that a lot of our volunteers like to control on our sites. So if you want to control Scotch broom, we can help you get tools and techniques to do that. Yeah, one to look out for. Next slide. Another very common invasive is English ivy. Sometimes it's called common ivy, so you might know it as that name, but most people are able to identify this plant. It's a very effective and attractive ground cover. So it's often used for landscaping, but it spreads aggressively and can quickly take over, acres and acres. You probably have seen it covering like roadsides, growing up houses. It can grow pretty aggressively. It can grow into your house. When it grows up a tree or like up a wall surface, it will start to flower and seed, and it spreads in a lot of ways, but that's like a bad sign. You don't want that. It also can damage trees by making a lot of really heavy vegetation on the tree. So yeah, it's definitely something we want to control. If you see it on your sites, please tell us. Pulling it is a pretty effective means of control, but it can resprout from pieces of roots and stems. So it's important to make sure you're actually pulling the entire plant. Yes, please do not plant this in your yards. Next plant. Next invasive, this one you're very likely to be familiar with, is the Himalayan blackberry. It can grow into very large brambles. Sometimes it can kind of grow up trees and like mix in with other shrubs. It is not really helpful to wildlife at all. It doesn't provide great food or shelter. Birds do eat the berries and sometimes nest in the plants, but that's just another way to spread it. So we don't really want that. There's another type of invasive blackberry called the cutleaf blackberry. And there's also a native species called trailing blackberry. So if you ever have questions about how to tell the difference between those species, that's something you can let us know. But yeah, it's pretty easy to identify. Next species. These are some species that some of them are still pretty common, but they're a little bit less common than the three I talked about. So this next one is European coltsfoot. It's fairly new to Washington, so it's important that if you see it, you tell us so that we can try to eradicate it as quickly as we can. Until a couple years ago, this plant was only found in King County, like as an invasive species to the Western Washington. But now it's been recorded in several different counties. It's very difficult to control. If you find it, don't try to dig it out, as it's able to propagate by stolons. So any small fragment can create a new plant. Unfortunately, the only really effective means is with chemicals. So yeah, it's pretty easy to identify because the flower stalks emerge before the leaves, and it has pretty thick like flower stalks comparatively to the rest of its leaves and stuff. Yeah. Next plant. This is bitter lettuce. It's pretty new on the scene in Washington. I have seen this plant at a couple land trust sites, so it's definitely one that you could encounter. They were introduced to Western Washington by trucks transporting hay from the east side of the Cascades. There are several species and subspecies that are able to intergrade or crossbreed. So the leaf can be pretty variable, but the flowers are small yellow tufts, kind of like miniature dandelions, and the seeds spread via wind the same way. I find that it's pretty easy to identify because the leaves kind of grow down the stem in a fairly characteristic way. But yeah, something that we haven't done a lot of control of, but will be doing in the future. So yeah, Next plant. This plant is spotted jewelweed or Impatiens capensis. There are other impatiens species that are native to the area, but this one, spotted jewelweed, is not, and it's probably the most common one you'll see. Unfortunately, it's rapidly spreading through wetlands throughout Western Washington, and including on a few land trust properties. Luckily, pulling this plant is a very effective means of control. It's very easy to pull, and because the roots are very shallow, they don't really grow deep into dirt. And it's easily identified by its distinctive orange flowers and reddish watery stem. Yeah, another fun fact is many people think that its sap is helpful for nettle sting, and it usually grows near nettles. So that could be a benefit if you're trying to pull it, but you get stung by nettles. You could just use the jewelry to help you out, allegedly. Next plant. Knapweeds. There are a few different species of knapweeds, and they're spreading rapidly through counties of Southwest Washington. I personally am not able to tell the difference between different species of knapweeds, but they're all bad. So that's, that's good. It's not good, but it's like you can identify them. They're all bad. These plants are capable of establishing monocultures in over a year or less, and they can even outcompete Scotch broom. So it's important that we try to get rid of them as much as possible. Yeah. And I've even seen them like flowering in January. They're kind of weird plants, so definitely keep an eye on them if you see them on your site. And if you're in a knapweed infested area, make sure you de-seed yourself before leaving, because we don't want to spread this any more than it already is. Next plant. Yeah, next invasive, yellow archangel. This is another plant that people think is very beautiful, and it is. I think it's pretty. But it's still being sold in nurseries in Washington, despite the fact that it's listed as an invasive. Very difficult to eradicate. Similar to ivy and a couple other plants we've talked about, it can reproduce from or regenerate from basically any plant part that falls to the ground. I have seen plants regrowing from just like a leaf that fell, so that's bad, hard to control. But the silver patches make it pretty easily identifiable. There's not a lot of native plants that grow that way. Yeah, if you have this in your gardens, maybe consider removing it or just being really careful about it. Many of the places on land trust properties where we see archangel is like right along the fence line between a residential area, and it spreads from there. Next plant. We're getting toward the end. I know there's a lot of plants, but they're important to know. Next plant is purple loosestrife. This plant is seen more frequently in the eastern part of the country, but it's beginning to encroach on our wetlands and riparian areas here. It can grow up to 10 feet tall in some cases. It's pretty big. Some people can confuse it for our native hardhack or spirea, but the flowers are pretty different. The flowers themselves are larger, and the growth pattern is different, but make sure that you know which one is which before you try to control it. Yeah. We have seen that on our properties before. Burdock is another plant. Many of you have probably seen it. Many of you have probably gotten the burrs stuck to your clothes or to your dog or something like that. There are two species that can occur in Western Washington, Arcticum lapa and Arcticum minus. They're both listed as invasives. The young plants can be dug out, but established specimens have really, really long taproots that can be like as big as your wrist and extend several feet into the soil, so pretty hard to pull. And the heads of the seeds are capable of maturing and releasing seed, even if they're still green. So make sure you, get them off your clothes. Don't cut them and leave them around the place, even if it doesn't seem like they could seed, because they probably could. Next species, chicory. I have seen this plant, I think. I've seen something that looks like it. I think it's very cute, but it is not native and it's spreading. I don't think it's listed as an invasive yet, but something to look out for. It really likes dry, kind of disturbed waste soils, like a vacant lot or an old construction site, that kind of thing. So if you have it on your properties, remove it before it becomes a bigger problem. Next plant. Moth melon, another one that we've seen just, I think, one time on land trust properties, but it could be spreading. It's not on the state invasives list yet, but it's one to watch out for. It's considered invasive in some adjacent Northwest states, and yeah, should be controlled before it has a chance to spread more. It occurs in several different color variations, so the white and the yellow flowers are both the same species. And the last plant to talk about is a plant and an animal. Tansy ragwort, common invasive. It has kind of a similar look from afar from some other plants like St. John's wort or the common tansy, but the flowers are a little bit bigger and like kind of more tightly clustered together. It is invasive. It is toxic to livestock, so it should be removed if you have it like in your pastures or anything like that, or if you see it on land trust property. But it is responding pretty well to a harmless biocontrol, which is the cinnabar moth. I have seen these red moths a lot and not even really realize that they were cinnabar moths. But yeah, the caterpillars only eat tansy ragwort. When there's no tansy to eat, the caterpillars die off and their breeding cycle ends. So the cinnabar moths are not becoming invasive, but they're helping to control tansy. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, and that's my last plant. If you have any plant questions, I know I haven't been looking at the chat while I've been doing this, but I will answer your plant questions in the chat after. Next slide. Yeah, and then briefly, I'm going to talk about wildlife you might see on the land. A lot of our volunteers see wildlife such as bald eagles, deer, elk, coyotes. If it's a season where where salmon are running, you might be able to see salmon in the river in a tributary. Less likely, you might see a predator such as a black bear. That's unlikely, but just make sure you are prepared as if you bring what you would bring when you're going on a hike. If you usually bring bear spray on a hike, maybe consider doing that to a land trust property. But most likely, you will just see things like deer, elk, eagles, etc., or other wildlife. Yeah, another thing you might see, beavers, because a lot of our properties are, right along the river or right along tributaries or in wetland areas. It's likely that you'll see beavers and beaver activity. Sometimes people can become concerned about beavers because they are seemingly working in a different way than we do. We like to plant trees, beavers like to eat our trees, and that can be sometimes frustrating. However, we love to see beavers on our property. A lot of beavers are a sign of a healthy ecosystem and healthy, river and like wetland system. So if you see a beaver or evidence of beavers, let us know. We love to see pictures of beaver dams and beavers eating trees, but it's not a cause for concern. It's just part of what beavers do. Yeah, that's the end of my section. Susanna, you're muted. You're muted, Susanna.
Let's see. Yes, I cannot see anything when I'm screen sharing except what I'm screen sharing. So couldn't find the unmute. Okay, this is just a little slide about resources and tools that you might use when you're out on the land. There's iNaturalist, Picture This, Seek, eBird. These are all different like apps you could use. There's field guides like the Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast, the Sibley Birds West. These are great to take out with you to identify what you're seeing. Of course, binoculars are always great to have, a camera, compass, recording maps. All of these things are great things to have when you're out on the land. And I believe we're already to our next section and our next guest speaker. Let me see. Yes, so I'm going to stop share right now. All right, so the next section is a special presentation by Chris Peck, who can introduce himself and tell you more about his background that he's coming from. And hopefully we're gonna get it where he can share his screen and his presentation with you. Chris, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen right now. It's actually the first time I'm doing this, so hopefully I do it right. But yeah, while I'm getting that ready, I will introduce myself. Yeah, my name is Chris. I don't know if you guys can see this screen. Is it working?
Yes, oh my gosh, we can see it.
Working. Awesome. Yeah, my name is Chris Peck. I've been working and volunteering with Nisqually Land Trust in various capacities since 2012. I actually came on as AmeriCorps volunteer coordinator in 2012. And right now I'm resident stewardship caretaker at Yelm Shoreline property. So I'm also a site steward, volunteer site steward right now. And what I'm gonna share with you all today is some photos and my experiences birding on the Nisqually Land Trust land since 2012. All of these slides and the photos are pictures that myself or my partner Kirsten have taken. Oops, don't want to go there yet. And so yeah, what I'm going to go over are just some of the usual suspects you might see of birds on land trust properties, and some habitat characteristics of land you might be stewarding and what birds you might see based on the habitat that you're going to be stewarding for. And generally, just to give you a background on why I'm giving this presentation, I've been a hobby birder or bird watcher for about 10 years now. Just became kind of, you know, as a part of working in the field, became curious about birds and plants, and that curiosity just pushed me, like, I want to know what everything is. Like, I have to figure it out. So that's kind of where that curiosity came from. I started volunteering with the local Audubon chapters, which if you are interested in birding, I'd recommend getting involved with them, because the best way to learn is by going out with folks who know. It's really hard, and that same thing with plants. It's really hard to just grab a guidebook and then look through it and try to ID birds that way, or plants even. It's good to have somebody who knows what they're talking about. Go out with them. They can share their knowledge with you. And to me, that's the best way to learn. So in Pierce County, you have Tahoma Audubon Society. And then in Lewis and Thurston, you have the Black Hills Audubon Society. So if you are interested, I'd recommend checking those groups out, because they have great walks and talks. So as you can see, the first slide is are these beautiful little great horned owl chicks that we actually found on the property that we're caretaking for and stewarding, Yelm Shoreline property at Railway. We were walking along the Centralia Canal, and we looked over and we saw what we call wash on the tree, which is basically bird droppings. And we're like, huh, like, I wonder what those two little lumps are. And sure enough, we looked with our binoculars, and there were two little chicks staring back at us, and we're like, oh my gosh, where's the mom? And sure enough, we saw the mom through the trees, and it was so hard to find that bird. Great horned owls, the adults and the chicks, have incredible camouflage. So most of the time with any owl, you're not going to see them. They'll be able to see you. It's kind of happenstance that you get a glimpse of them. And this mom, actually, we saw fly because we spooked it, and then it perched, and that's the only way we would have seen the mom. And we went back and monitored the chicks as they grew older, you know, when every other day or so. We only saw the mom maybe twice, and we went probably a dozen times. So we knew that she was watching us, but you know, we probably didn't like that we were, you know, visiting the baby so much. But yeah, and that is, you know, this forest habitat here is riparian and floodplain habitat. Courtney and Susanna talked about that habitat a little bit. That is a preferred habitat by great horned owls because of the large cavities you can get, especially within the big leaf maple trees. And that's where you'll find even barn owls. Sometimes you'll find barred owls in those cavities as well. that we actually went back to look at that same cavity, and there are now raccoons that are nesting in there. So that's a popular tree for nesting animals because of that little bench. So this is a really busy slide. I apologize in advance. There are lots of little birds. But I just kind of wanted to highlight some of the usual suspects that you're going to see, that's what we call them, year-round. And basically the common species that don't migrate that you will see pretty consistently regardless of habitat. And you'll see dark-eyed juncos. That's the Oregon dark-eyed junco. You'll see them a lot, and you'll actually, they're ground nesters. So you'll end up seeing the female in the summertime collecting nest material. So keep an eye out. The one up there that's pictured with the black head in the top left corner is a male. The female is going to be a lot more gray and drab. And in the spring, you'll almost consistently see the female with nesting material in its mouth. So keep an eye out for those. And they're very common on land trust properties. You also have the common woodpeckers that are around year-round, which are red-breasted sapsucker and northern flicker. The flickers make that high-pitched, almost like screamy whistle noise that you'll hear. And I'm not even going to try to imitate it. Don't ask me to try to imitate birds, because I'll, if you do, I'll try, but I'll kind of look a little goofy. And red-breasted sapsucker, that's the woodpecker with the bright red head. The whole head is red. There are other little smaller woodpeckers that have a little red on the back of their head that are called downy or hairy woodpeckers. And then, of course, you have the large pileated woodpecker that I have a picture of later. You have chickadees, chestnut-backed chickadees, and black-capped chickadees. There are actually two different types in the Northwest here. Chestnut-backed chickadees are more upland birds. They prefer conifers. Black-capped chickadees are usually more riparian birds, but you will see both. Sometimes they have mixed flocks. And then you have finches, which you have the house finch that's here year-round. And you also have a bird called a pine siskin that have the huge flocks that actually have had a huge boom in population over the last 2 years. So if you have bird feeders up, you've probably been seeing a lot of pine siskins at your feeders recently. And that's created some issues. It's just a random fact, and just so you all know. But pine siskins have been having a problem with salmonella this year, and a lot of those birds are getting very ill and are dying because the populations are very large. So if you do see slower dying pine siskins, and I'd recommend looking up the picture yourself, that's salmonella that's really hitting us. And if you see that on your property, I would recommend taking your feeders down, because feeders are a great way for disease to propagate in those species. And I'm sure I meant to mention, I'm sure some of you are also bird watchers and birders. So feel free to add anything in the chat if I get anything wrong, or if you have something to add. And so, here are a few birds that migrate in the springtime and in the summer that are fairly common. Some are harder to see, but you will hear more often than see. Depending on the time of spring, the yellow-rumped warbler is what we call an elevation migrator. So they'll actually come from California or Mexico. They'll come up here. You'll see them in the lowlands for a couple weeks, and they'll be in huge numbers. And then all of a sudden they're gone because they're up in the mountains. So they come up here and then they elevation migrate up to the mountains. And you'll see them mostly in riparian habitat. They really like wetland, riparian, floodplain. So those are a pretty common species that you'll see in the springtime. And you also have black-headed grosbeaks, beautiful little birds with a beautiful song, almost sounds like a robin. We call it a drunk robin song, but because they kind of swirl a little bit more, and to an untrained ear, it sounds exactly like a robin. And birding by ear is something that is very hard, that is learned over time, and I'm kind of slowly getting there. So, and those also like riparian habitat. You'll see them pretty commonly in the spring. Same thing with like yellow warblers are also a wetland riparian bird that you'll see walking around close to the river. And then of course, swallows. I personally love swallows. They're super graceful the way they fly. They also have, on various properties like Powell Creek pastures, There are nesting boxes for tree swallows. And I have a great picture on the next slide, but I'll wait for that. And then hummingbirds. There are actually two predominant hummingbirds that exist within Western Washington. Sometimes you'll get a third or fourth, but those are rarities. The two main ones you'll see are the Anna's hummingbird, which actually exists year-round in Western Washington now. That wasn't the case, but because of year-round food availability, they're able to hang around year-round now. So if you see a hummingbird in the winter, it is 98% most likely going to be an Anna's hummingbird. And then in the spring and summer, you have rufous hummingbirds, which are really territorial. You'll see them chase off even other larger birds from feeders. They're really fun to watch. Those are the bright orange ones. If you see a hummingbird with any orange or kind of rusty orange color, that's always going to be, in this area, a rufous hummingbird. And then here are some other migrators that I just wanted to highlight. You have a ruby-crowned kinglet that will actually migrate to the lowlands in the winter. So you'll see ruby-crowned kinglets flying around in the winter in riparian areas specifically in the winter time, but then you won't see them in the summer because they elevation migrate. And varied thrushes are also a bird you'll see in the winter in the lowlands and also elevation migrate. They have that kind of raspy whistle song that you'll hear in the summer in upland habitats, especially in the mountains, maybe at about 2,000 to 10,000 feet or so. Maybe not quite 10,000. We'll say like 8,000. But they're one of the prettiest birds. They were a highlight for David Sibley, who draws these guides, and it's on the cover of one of those. And then Wilson's warblers are another common one in riparian that you'll see. Great little bird. They have that little cap on it. Love those guys. Cedar waxwings, you can actually see which are on the bottom left. You can see a little red spot on the one up front that's kind of looking down. That's actually where they secrete oil that then they use to preen themselves for waterproofness, which is why they call them cedar waxwing. They have a waxy wing that they preen themselves with so that they can stay dry. And here's one of my favorite pictures. I love this. I took this out at Powell Creek Pastures. There's a lot that you could say about this. You can say divorce birds, political discussions, whatever you want. But there are a ton of nesting boxes out in Powell Creek Pastures for specifically for the western bluebird. But tree swallows are very territorial, and sometimes they end up taking over those nesting boxes, as you can see why based on this personality. But yeah, I just love this photo, and the tree swallows out there are not bashful. I probably got within about 5 feet of these birds. They didn't care about me at all. So it's Powell Creek Pastures that's a riparian area that was pasture land that's being turned back into forest. So there's a mix of open habitat and then some riparian wetland habitat that makes it a really unique property. And you can actually find almost every species of swallow there except for the bank swallow. And I think we've seen them there before, but there are 5 species of swallows or 6. You can't find purple martins there, which are another type of swallow, but yeah, really unique property. And here's some of the nesting boxes. On the left, you can see a little tree swallow poking its head out of a nesting box at Powell Creek Pastures. And then another shot of a western bluebird building a nest or taking food into the nest at one of the nesting boxes. Really unique site because it was an old pasture. And also talking about pasture land, you have various sparrows you might see on properties. Sparrows are hard to ID. And if you're not, it takes a trained eye and time to really get to know the difference between them, but they are unique, especially based on their song and habitat. Sparrows are very specific in the habitat that they require generally. And that's the same thing for a chipping sparrow and savanna sparrow. You'll almost only ever see them, especially savanna sparrow, in pasture land. And all of these photos were either taken at Spooner property at Powell Creek or Powell Creek Pastures. And in those pastures as well, you'll see, because it's open, you'll see red-tailed hawks. You'll see maybe a northern harrier. that will be out perusing the fields for mice and other little rodents. Of course, you'll see bald eagles, especially along the river in the wintertime when salmon are running. See lots of eagles. Sometimes you'll see a tree with 50 eagles at one time, depending on where you are, especially closer to the mouth of the river, closer to the delta. And then any farmland pasture, you'll see some kestrel occasionally, really small little bird of prey, specialized in hunting little rodents and other bird species, one of my favorite little birds of prey. And this is one of my favorites. We've seen lots of western tanagers at Van Eaton along the Michelle River. That's more of an upland habitat. Instead of riparian, you have some riparian, but mostly you'll see them in the upland coniferous forest. Tanagers generally like to hang out way high in the canopy, so they are kind of hard to see, even if they are bright yellow. And we like to call them the parrots of the Pacific Northwest, because they specialize in eating insects and also seeds depending on the year, and they're just really, really pretty birds. And they also sound like robins. There are a lot of birds out here that their song sounds like robins, so just so you know. If you hear a robin and you're like, oh, there's a robin, it might not be a robin, just FYI. Then this is a highlight for us. Evening grosbeaks are beautiful birds, kind of rare to see. These are a bird that follow food availability. They specialize in seed eating. You can see it eating the big leaf maple seeds. So they'll follow where food is. Usually they're upland birds. You'll see them in coniferous forests eating seeds, eating conifer seeds. They have that big bill that can crack that open. But they'll come down to riparian and floodplain to get big leaf maple seeds if they're available. And this was along at Yelm Shoreline, where you have a ton of older big leaf maples that keep their seeds. And so we do hear them and see them occasionally in the lowlands, but most of the time you'll see them up at Michelle River or Mount Rainier Gateway or those upland habitats. And speaking of upland, you'll see, especially in Mount Rainier Gateway or Michelle River properties, the closer you get to Mount Rainier, you'll get the upland habitat that can host barred owls, the northern spotted owl, which is an endangered species. I haven't seen one on Land Trust land, but there are people who do surveys for northern spotted owl. And that's one of the habitats that the Land Trust is trying to promote. As they mentioned, the mature forest habitats that, the larger old growth trees can support northern spotted owl nests, and also a bird called a marbled murrelet. That is a seabird that can fly up to 75 miles inland from the sea to nest in specifically old growth forests. Really interesting bird. I'd love to talk about them more, but I don't want to, I could talk about birds for a long time, so I will temper myself. And then I talk about the pileated woodpecker a little bit. That's the largest woodpecker in North America. A lot of people know it because it's the Woody the Woodpecker bird. They have that bright red mohawk, and if you hear really loud, fast drumming on a tree in the springtime, and it would be really, really loud, it's most likely a pileated woodpecker that is pecking on a tree for territory. You have red-breasted sapsuckers and flickers and pileated woodpeckers. Most woodpeckers do drum for their habitat. And so if you've ever had a woodpecker drum on your gutter or on the side of your house, that is territorial, usually. Sometimes it's around specifically trying to find a mate, but usually they have their habitat and they're trying to be as loud as they can to be like, this is my spot, nobody come over here. So yeah, in upland forests, you're gonna find a variety, including, I didn't talk about red-breasted nuthatches or a bird called a brown creeper. Those birds you'll see them climbing up trees. So if you see a bird that seems to be crawling up the side of a tree, that's usually a brown creeper or is going to be a red-breasted nuthatch. And they specialize in eating insects and sometimes seeds off of trees. And I haven't talked much about wetland habitat because wetland habitat would open such a huge variety of birds. I wanted to focus mostly on forest birding, but any wetland habitat, you're going to find a lot of waterfowl. various waterfowl depending on the time of year. There are some you're going to see year round, others you won't. And also in a river, you're going to see, and we actually saw one on the property I'm caretaking for, but an American dipper. Those are really cool little birds. One of my favorites. They're really drab, but they specifically live within rivers and streams, and they can withstand, you know, huge amounts of water rushing over their body and hanging onto rocks and feeding on invertebrates under the water. So if you ever see a little gray, really drab bird flying over the stream, and then it will dip its body up and down, you'll see it perch, and they call it a dipper because it'll dip up and down over and over and over again. Really common along streams. And then I could have talked about shorebirds for a long time. I decided not to. But you'll see, especially in the summer, you'll see spotted sandpipers along the rivers on rocky shorelines, and a bird called a killdeer. Killdeer are known for nesting in the worst of locations, as in parking lots, sites that are going to be constructed, around little puddles, you know, in public areas. But you also see them along rocky shorelines in the Nisqually watershed. And then, you know, we talked a little bit about Anderson Island, nearshore bluffs and coastal lagoons. The nearshore bluffs, you'll have, and I wish I had a picture of it, you'll have pigeon guillemots, which are really cool little birds with bright red feet, bright red mouths, black body, white wing bar. And they're an overall indicator of Puget Sound health. So if those birds were to decrease in populations, we'd know that, you know, maybe the overall system isn't as healthy. And these are some highlights for us, some more rarities that my partner Kirsten and I found on properties. You have a Townsend's warbler, which is actually around year round, but they hang out way high in trees and they're really hard to see. And they're also just beautiful little birds. Warblers in general are kind of hard to ID because they're really quick moving around, and hard to see in general. So Townsend's warbler, and then lesser goldfinch is really big for us because they're not typically around here. Their range is from Mexico to about Central Oregon, but as food availability increases for that bird, they actually like to eat common tansy a lot. As food availability increases and climate change continues to continue, they've been moving north. And there are a few species that are doing that. There's the California scrub jay that is also slowly moving north, and you'll see more and more. And that's the cousin to the Steller's jay. If you ever see a bright blue bird with a mohawk, a lot of people call them blue jays. That's actually Steller's jay. But lesser goldfinch is really exciting. We saw it really close to the cabin that we're caretaking for. And they look a lot like an American goldfinch, but are actually more, their native range is more California. So it's interesting that they're slowly moving north. Then here's a little funny story that I thought I'd end off with. So there was this was back, I think in 2013, there was the railway property, there was a ruffed grouse that typically you'll see in upland habitat. We like to call them heart attack birds because you'll be walking around on an old logging road, come over a hill, and then all of a sudden this huge flush of 6 grouse will happen. And the flaps can sound, of their wings can sound like growls, like right away, you know, and you're like, oh my gosh. So I've been spooked. I've actually fallen over on my butt from spooking those birds before. And if you're ever walking around and you hear deep guttural, like whoa, 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 in the woods, that's a ruffed grouse, most likely, or a type of grouse. But this grouse was particularly friendly in a way that it would walk right up to us and posture and be like, this is my area. It was territorial to anything that would come into its habitat. We think partially because we had these wooden stakes for plantings that we were, you know, hitting into the ground. And I think it mimicked the noise of the ruffed grouse wing flap because it was very brash. And we had planting events where you would have to have one person guard the ruffed grouse with the shovel as somebody else planted, because when you knelt down to plant a tree, it would jump at you and it would bite our pant legs, and it just did not like our presence, and it followed everybody around. And so here's the old land steward Charlie with the grouse. Charlie looks a little timid because it would jump at your face if you got too close. And here's we called it Oscar the Grouse, you know, because that seemed like an appropriate name. We don't know what happened to Oscar. Probably, you know, potentially got a little too territorial with the coyote. That's what we guess. But you will see ruffed grouse, especially in the uplands on land trust property. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I added some resources here for if you do want to get involved. Again, I talked about the Audubon societies. Good to be involved with the local Audubon chapters if you are interested. And then eBird is a great resource. You can go to eBird and actually look up the county that you're in and see how many species have ever been seen and in the county and where those species have been seen. And you get, you know, a bunch of different lists from citizen scientists. And then you have some guides that I put on the bottom here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Chris. It looked like Martin had his hand up. Do you have a question, Martin? On.
Thanks, Courtney. Well, just wanted to thank Chris for that. Chris had a photograph of an eagle up there on the Michelle River at the Van Eaton property. And I was there once with Chris and we looked up and there's at least 10 eagles flying in a big circle. And the Nisqually tribe and its volunteer friends throw frozen salmon in the river to nourish the river. And it also helps with eagles to get through the winter. So great stories, Chris, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I put this in the chat, but Chris mentioned northern harriers. I have seen, I don't know many birds, but I can identify that one. And I have seen at least 2 northern harriers at Powell Creek Spooner. And yeah, we've also had some other grouse experiences than Oscar. Probably not the same grouse, but there was a grouse that was hanging out on our truck mirror for a while. Yeah, definitely they've given me a heart attack a few times as well. So thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, I will make Chris no longer a co-host so we don't have so many co-hosts. Now we can get into some more stewarding information.
Right. I'm going to share my screen again. There we go. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Chris. That was awesome. Information about birds you guys might see, and Courtney, information about some invasive, some things to look out for on the land. So the next part will be just how do we report all this stuff that we see, right? So any change to the properties that you're stewarding is worth reporting on, but certainly there are certain things we prioritize, you know, such as the Plant and Wildlife ID. On your first visit, you're just going to want to discover, you know, notable things, maybe mark them on a map to return to you next time. And you can use this wonderful app called Landscape. We like to use this. It's a land conservation database. You can report to it directly from the field, map your visits, observations, photos. It helps us to gather everything in one place. So over time, we found that, you know, it's better than, you know, we've outgrown the old spreadsheets and Word documents. Moving to this cloud-based database has been really, really helpful to us. So whatever you do out in the field using the app, it gets sent when you send it in, it comes right to us on the database, and we're able to look at it and do what we need to with it. So this is what a landscape report would look like. So you can see you're gonna have your protected area name. You're gonna be able to track the time of your visit, the date, and who did the visit. Yeah, and things like names and contact information, people you may have encountered during the visit, if you come across any people, your weather conditions during the visit, what parts of the property you visited, any issues that you would want to report to us that you identify, any actions. So if you decide, you're not required to, but if you decided to pick up some debris or pull some Scotch broom, then you could note that to us as well. Any changes you've seen to the site since the last time you were there? Any invasive weeds or patches of them you might have seen? And yeah, any fish, wildlife observation, any birds that you found, and just anything else you would like to report to us, that can all be done here on this land. So when you put it in the app, then when we receive it, we're able to print it out in this report. So on the app, there's also, you know, the maps, and you can actually mark photo points on it. Places you've stopped, you can mark and make notes within the app. And all of this stuff you would learn if you become a site steward with us. We'll be meeting with you and showing you how to use the app and giving you information on that. But this is just kind of an overview of what you can do with it. You can take photographs with it, because you know, it's just right there on your phone. Take photographs and put your notes down about what you saw. So here, you know, I've got like a Doug fir that was planted that's doing well. So you can check on plantings at the site that we may have done. Blackberry that was found, right? So, and it'll mark the location and everything, which is really nice. Yeah, so, and then overall, your reporting resources, again, you know, when we meet with you, you choose a site and we meet with you, then we would give you a binder that's going to give you all the checklist maps, everything you would need to do your reporting, going over the landscape. Yeah, there's the stuff we mentioned before that you would bring along on your visit, maybe a camera or your phone camera, binoculars, field guides, the other apps we can show you about, like iNaturalist, Seek, that can help you identify stuff. So if you're still new to it like me, then I like to use that Seek app, and I can try to figure out what kind of plant or tree is this, and then I would be able to mark it easier on my report. So yeah, there's other things that are optional you can do as a site steward. If you want to do some invasive removal, some ivy or Scotch broom or blackberry you find, you can do that. It is not required. There's, when we do plantings after a period of time, some of the tubes might have come off on their own or might need to be removed. That's an optional, again, an optional activity that you could do on the land, is help with the removal of the tubes when they're no longer needed. Trash removal, sometimes we find that as well. So if you wanted to do that, and you can, the big thing would be just report it to us. We'll go out there and be taking care of it too. So again, it's not required, but you could do that. Work party co-host. Some of our site stewards like to host their own work parties and help with like removing Scotch broom or different things like that. So that would be another one. You contact us to kind of let us know and what you're doing and all that, just so we're aware, and you could set up and bring out a group of, you know, friends or you know, family to help you do a work party. Let's see. All right, so the next step would be, you know, becoming a site steward. You would want to pick out an area you would like to steward. So Addie, our land steward, is going to go over our different properties with you, so you have a better idea of what you can choose from to steward.
Susanna, yeah. Just quick, were we going to do our breakout room activity now or after the properties overview?
I was thinking it was after, but we can do it anytime.
Let's do it after the properties overview then.
Okay.
Okay, cool. And we'll give you a properties overview. Yeah, this is going to be a pretty brief, broad overview of the different land trust properties. We're definitely happy to discuss with you in more detail if you're interested in becoming a site steward, to talk about what properties you're interested in and what different considerations are in play with the different properties. But just to kind of give you an idea of the options that are out there. We'll do this. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. So here, the Nisqually watershed is outlined in black. The stars all represent approximate locations of land trust properties. So I'm going to start down in the sound and work up towards the mountain. So our first property is Anderson Island. Yep. it's circled there. Cool. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, here's a map of Anderson Island. Obviously, this is technically not inside the Nisqually watershed, but it's in the Nisqually nearshore area. It's in the part of the Puget Sound that is heavily influenced by the Nisqually River. So we're really happy to be starting to get involved in that area out there somewhat more recently. This property is located on South Oro Bay. Go to the next slide. And yeah, this is just pretty unique in terms of land trust properties because it is on an island in the Puget Sound. There's lots of tidal flats, tidal wetlands, and also upland wetlands. Lots of forests. We were just tromping around out there yesterday. Lots of really cool like huckleberry and just really neat wetland environments. So it's a unique spot for land trust properties. Our next spot is kind of the mainland nearshore and estuary area. These are our Hogum Bay and Red Salmon Creek protected areas. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so you can see the different land trust properties here. The squiggly looking part in the middle is the Nisqually Delta at the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. And there's a couple of other ownerships in the area too here where we have conservation easements and stuff like that. Next slide. Cool. Yep. So again, these are some pretty unique ecosystems. Our Hogum Bay protected area protects a pocket estuary, which is a really important environment along the Puget Sound, especially in terms of like fish rearing and stuff like that. And they're often pretty heavily threatened by development because everybody likes to have, you know, a great view of the water. So it's a really special place down in the estuary there. We also have some marshes that are really important for supporting salmon and a lot of really nice upland forest habitat as well. And these are also our properties that are closest to the Olympia area. So sometimes people appreciate that if they're there. Yeah, we can go down there. Right, moving down river to kind of the greater Yelm area. We can go to the next slide here. These are our lower reach and Yelm shoreline protected areas. So a lot of the pictures that Chris was showing us are from the Yelm shoreline area that he stewards. These are all located on the main stem of the Nisqually, and obviously you can see they're pretty close to the city of Yelm. So it's neat to have these pockets of forest in an otherwise pretty developed area. Here we have, these sites have a lot of really nice river access to the main stem and a lot of just really solid mature forest with lots of really cool cedar groves and stuff like that. And because these properties are located pretty close to Yelm, we often see a little bit more access from other members of the public around here. So it's always good to have more volunteers out on the land, checking up on things, interacting with those other visitors and letting them know about what the land trust is up to, just keeping an eye on stuff. Yeah, just some really beautiful stretches of the river. Moving upriver now, these are the last properties that I'll talk about that are on the main stem of the Nisqually. They're kind of in the like middle reach areas of the Nisqually. So moving from left to right here, we have our Thurston Ridge, Lacamas Flats, and Powell Creek protected areas. If you're familiar with Wilcox Farms, they are the area that is brownish towards the top left of your screen. So yeah, this is an area where the land trust is expanding definitely recently, we've had some recent acquisitions in here, which is pretty exciting. We can go to the next slide. So because we're expanding a lot in this area, we're also doing a lot of restoration projects. If you've planted trees with us this winter, chances are that you were on one of these properties. And there's also a lot of mature forest in this area as well. I also just really like the kind of the characteristic of the river in this area. Obviously, there's some like pretty solid lunch spots, really neat gravel bars and log jams and stuff like that. And the river is changing course all the time. This is probably one of the most dynamic stretches of the river. So especially when we're having like winter floods and stuff, the river is shifting, eroding on one side, accreting on the other. And it's always fun to check up on that and see how the river is changing. Okay, and our next section here is the major tributaries of the Nisqually River. They're kind of in the general Eatonville area, moving up watershed. And so, yeah, we have several different ownerships in here. We'll be talking about our properties on the Ohop Creek and Michelle River. And you can see that we also have ownership by the Nisqually Indian tribe and the town of Eatonville in here as well, with various different projects that we've worked on with them, either like helping them out with acquisitions, transferring properties to them, having conservation easements, all that kind of stuff. Lots of property in here. On Ohop Creek, we've been doing a lot of work in different sections of the creek. Lower Ohop is kind of one of our big restoration projects that folks are familiar with. Ohop Creek used to be, it was ditched by early like agricultural folks over to the side of the valley. So it's kind of just one deep straight shot, which is really not great for habitat. Salmon have really hard time getting upstream when the stream is just like really, it's like, it would be like swimming up a log flume basically. So the Land Trust was involved in restoring the creek to its natural curvy meandery path to help restore that salmon habitat. It's also really fun to explore this area because the forests that we have, the trees that we've planted are kind of just starting to become like actual forests. So it's neat to kind of see that project progressing. And upriver as well, sorry, still on the OHAP, there's also been a lot of more recent plantings in kind of the middle and upper reaches of the creek, both north and south of Ohop Lake, if you're familiar with that area. So yeah, lots of fun projects going on. Over on the Michelle now, yeah. So the Michelle is a really different system than Ohop Creek. You can see it's like significantly rockier. I think it's really beautiful. It's also really flashy. So if there's flooding in the winter, the Michelle is like, it goes crazy. And in the summer, it gets really shallow and you can like walk right across it in a lot of places. So I always like to explore those areas. It's pretty fun. We also, this is one of the sites where we recently finished an engineered logjam project, which you can kind of see in the background of this picture on the left. It's that big pile of sticks. So engineered logjams, if you're not familiar, are really important, again, for improving salmon habitat. Historically, there used to be a lot more woody debris in our river because of, it's just how it naturally is, but because of logging practices and like literally exploding the logs out of the rivers, there's a lot less than there used to be. So engineered log jams are kind of trying to replace that functionality and help create more habitat for salmon and other fish. So yeah, Michelle River is, it's always changing too. fun to check up on, lots of projects going on. Also lots of upland forests, like Chris mentioned. Sorry, yeah, we can go on to the next one. So our last section here is kind of up in the foothills of Mount Rainier, up by Ashford. We can go to the next one. This is definitely our biggest acreage. You can see a lot of this area used to be former commercial timberland, and a good chunk of it is now under the ownership of the Nisqually Community Forest, which is kind of a subsidiary of the Land Trust that's really heavily focused on sustainable local forestry. And yeah, our properties up here are kind of focused on like creating the like future old growth forest for, especially for some of those bird species that Chris was talking about, like the spotted owl and marbled murrelet. So yeah, this is again just a huge area and lots of mature and maturing forest. Lots of very nice like babbling brooks, obviously some pretty cool mountain views, because it is getting up towards the mountains. Some parts of it can be kind of steep, but there's also some flatter areas as well. Yeah, just tons of space to explore up there. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have for properties overview, but again, we're happy to chat with you more about the areas that you're interested in, and yeah, have those individual conversations.
All right, Courtney, do we want to do the breakout room?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So we're gonna do a little bit of a breakout room activity. I think adding Susanna, it's gonna kick you into a breakout room. If you want to leave the room, you can, but I couldn't figure out how to not make you assigned to a breakout room. Yeah, if anybody needs to head out early, that's definitely okay. And yeah, if you have questions, feel free to email Susanna after this. But yeah, so I'm gonna put you in a breakout rooms, and then I'm going to paste a Google Doc link into the chat. So copy and paste that link into your browser. It's going to take you to a Google Doc that has several photos of land trust sites. And the exercise is basically in your group, look at the photos. There will be 3 photos. You can just choose to look at one, or you can look at all 3, and talk with your group about if you were on a site visit, you know, what would you notice? What things would you want to report back? You know, what plant species or animals do you see? That kind of thing. And you can either like select somebody in your group to write it down, or just talk about it. And then afterward, if people want to, we can share and talk about, you know, how kind of what you've noticed, what you would write in your report, based on what we talked about previously about what kind of observations we're looking for. So should be fun. I'm gonna paste the link in the chat box. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I have the full link.
And make sure you click on the link before you go to the breakout room, because it will disappear.
Yeah, I think you can still look at the chat, but yeah, click on the link beforehand. So there's the Google Doc. I guess you don't have to copy and paste. They've changed Zoom since the past. So click there, and then I'm going to, in a couple seconds, put you into breakout rooms. Are people able to access the link? Yes, cool. So you should have been invited to join breakout rooms. Seems like people are heading out.
It looks like we have some folks who are not assigned to breakout rooms too, because they came a little bit later.
Okay, I'll assign them to a room.
Thanks.
Kristen says, can I reassign her to room 5? sure.
I clicked the link, but I wasn't sure if I did it too soon, so I came back here, but now I can't get into the breakout room.
Oh yeah. Kristen, move to. I'm gonna put you in a different room. It looks like people in that room are not joining the room, so I'll just like put them into different rooms. Oh, now people are moving. Interesting. Anybody else having issues? It looks like people in room 5 are having issues. Well, if you haven't entered a breakout room, it may be because you didn't click the, I don't know. Maybe you didn't click the button that said to enter it. But we can talk about in this little room that is not the breakout room, we can do the same activity. So folks that are still in the main session, let's make our own breakout room. Everybody can unmute themselves if you want to participate.
Yeah.
Let's look at the first photo. If you were, it's a classic. If you were out on the site and you came across this, what would you observe? What would you write down?
English ivy and trash.
Yeah, that's a good one.
For sure.
Anything else?
What's going on with these little logs that look like they're speed bumps for a trail? Is that part of the restoration of a trail, or is it not just not supposed to be there?
Yeah, that is a user created bike situation. So that would definitely be something that's good.
Randy jumpy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all these things in the photos, it seems crazy, but they're all things that we've seen on our properties before, at least in some way. So like bike jumps and people making trails seems like something that like who would be doing this, but it has happened before. So yeah, really sometimes it's hard to know what to expect when you go out there. So it's good to be prepared for all circumstances. What are some positives we see in this photo? Anything to write about that would be a good thing?
Looks like there's some sword fern in the background.
Yeah, so despite the invasives and the weird use of property, there's some, fairly healthy plants going on there, sword fern, other trees and shrubs. What about in the second photo, the upper OHOP photo?
Stellar's jay.
Yeah, good bird ID.
I like the superimposed trash. And a fire. That's a problem.
A fire, definitely a problem. Hence, we don't want people camping. We love when people use our properties to watch birds, walk around, hang out in nature, enjoy themselves, but no actions that could be harmful or create an unnecessary impact. Some other things I might comment on if I were on this site, I would comment on like we've got a lot of snags. The plants it's hard to tell if they're growing or not, but I would like walk around and look to see if the plants in the tubes are growing well or if the tubes need to be removed. That kind of thing. And then in the third photo.
Can I ask a question before we move on this one? So with some of the taller grasses that are coming in around the tubes, is there ever any like clearing that happens around there to prevent competition or?
Yeah, so that would be something that if you notice the plants are being outcompeted by either like invasive grasses or just like native plants that are just in the way, that would be something that you could tell us. We do sometimes, well, actually we all the time in the spring do like what's called seedling release. So either we'll like, if if it's necessary, like use herbicide to control that, or sometimes even just like stomping down the grass can at least help a little bit. And that's something that you as a site steward could do. It doesn't seem like it would be effective, but it is actually fairly effective at controlling that, at least for a while. In some cases, we might put down mulch around plants if we have the time and materials to do so. But yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, there's definitely some places where our plants are like 1 foot tall and the reed canary grass is like 6 feet tall. So that's happening. We're always we want to know about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the third photo, if we want to move on to there, what do we notice about that photo?
I'll let somebody else talk.
Jane or Barbara or Stephen or somebody whose name is not actually Nikisha, but is using Nikisha's profile. I remember your message about that earlier. No, you can unmute yourselves if you want to talk to, if people are actually on here. Well, if I were doing a site report of the site, I would definitely say that there's a bear. That's exciting because we don't often see
well, and a grizzly bear too. That would be
yeah, that would be really out of place.
Yeah. And salmon.
Canoes, we have salmon.
We have salmon spawning, or jumping out of the water. I can't really tell. Yeah, that would be exciting to see. I spend so much time on land trust property and I hardly ever see salmon, so it would be cool if you did.
This looks like kind of a fresher fall, like just the log jam building up.
Yeah, that's definitely something to comment on. In this specific site, this big spanning log has actually been there for quite a few years. I don't know how many years, but at least like 5. But this is at one of our Michelle River sites, and a lot of people are familiar with this because it prevents people from being able to kayak down the river. There are a lot of reasons. I personally wouldn't kayak down the Michelle, but yeah. But yeah, no. If you saw people kayaking, that'd be something to comment on. Yeah, cool. Well, I think I'm gonna stop people's breakout rooms now because it's been a while.
Looks like some folks are trickling back.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I don't think everybody can hear me. Nobody can hear me in the other rooms, but yeah, they should be closing any minute now. People will hopefully be hopping back into the main session.
Does anybody have any questions about anything while we wait? If not, that's also fine.
Would now be a good time to take a quick bio break if it's needed?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, so for people that are coming back in, if you need to take a quick break, get a snack, go to the bathroom, etc., time to do that. We're pretty much done with the majority of our content. The rest of it will kind of just be answering any lingering questions and talking about next steps. If you do decide that you want to be a site steward, or if you want to, volunteer in another way, or just seek more information about the land trust. But yeah, if you want to take a quick break, be a good time to do it. And then while people are kind of taking a water break, if anybody has a question they'd like to ask live, not in person, if you want, you could unmute and ask a question while people are kind of getting some snacks and such.
So Courtney, as we're waiting, I just wanted to remind everyone that if you get a notice from the Nisqually Land Trust for the summer float trip, take up the offer, because there's no better way to experience the Nisqually river than by floating with a professional oars person and men and women. And it's just great.
Yeah, hopefully I don't know if that's planned for this summer yet, but if it happens, you should definitely look into it. Yeah, so someone asked if you choose to cite Steward. So these questions people are asking right now, I'm going to get in, we can answer those questions in a couple minutes. But keep putting questions in the chat if you have them. So yeah, I thought we could share a little bit about what we talked about. Does anybody, how about breakout room 1? Do you know, maybe you don't know what groups you were in. Yeah, if anybody has anything to share about what they talked about, what they noticed, how they might write their site visit based on the photo, let's share now. Feel free to unmute yourself and share if you want. If not, we can move on.
Maybe starting with the first picture.
Yeah, the first picture. What did people notice about that first picture?
On the, let me undo myself here. In the first photo, we identified some invasive ivy, trash, biker, and trees on the trail, down trees in the trail.
Yeah, that's great. That's definitely what I noticed as well. And if I saw that if I saw all that at once on the site, I would definitely note it. Anything else about the first site? Maybe any positives people noticed?
Healthy background vegetation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to remember, like, even though sometimes the situation might seem dire, maybe you see so much Himalayan blackberry and it's very sad. It's always important to note the positive things as well. We love to hear about positive site changes, you know, plants growing, birds you see, that kind of stuff. What about the second photo? Which was a burrow hop site, I think.
No one else? Well, we did, we noticed the stellar jay. We weren't looking for the positive, but yipes. We noted some camping, tires, fire, and trash.
Yeah, that's great stuff to notice. What about the third photo, the Michelle River?
Had some canoers that were going to be in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. They're going to get taken out by that spanning log.
And the grizzly bear.
We were happy to see it being a friendly. Identified sighting of the beaver activity and salmon. I think that's all.
Yeah, great. Well, hopefully that was a worthwhile exercise for you, and maybe a chance to talk with some other people, you know, in a little bit of smaller group. So hopefully that was fun and interesting. Yeah, let's go back to screen sharing for you, Susanna, and then after we have very few slides left, and after that I will answer everybody's questions in the chat.
All right. Okay, here we go. So we, just as, you know, in asking you to be site stewards, we have a commitment to you, right? So our commitment, if you become a site steward with us, is we will always follow up with you on your visit reports. So when you turn them in, you know, you're going to get an email or a phone call or something from me or from one of the other staff. And we're gonna make sure we touch base with any questions you have, any concerns. We're gonna keep your reports on record as part of our files for each protected area. We're gonna be giving you volunteer hours also for your time. And we're gonna support your site steward activities in any way that we can. So you've let us know what you need to be successful. Let's see, next slide. Okay, so we definitely want to thank you for being a part of, there's several of you who are already stewards, and we really want to thank you for being a part of it. Thank you all for your interest in it. It shows us that you're looking beyond the environment and the resources as a commodity, and you're seeing it as a part of the community to which we belong. So we would not be what we are today without your dedication to volunteering with us, stewarding with us. So we really appreciate you. And next steps. So if you want to, after this presentation, I'll be sending out an email with a little interest survey. So that would be your next step. If you want to move forward with going ahead and stewarding a site, complete the interest survey and get it back to me. Then we'll schedule you a site orientation where we would meet you out at the site, safely distanced, masked, all those kinds of things. To do a little orientation, we'll set you up with the landscape account. So the little app on your phone so that you can do your orientation. And yeah, and then you would go out and complete orientation, complete your site visit, and submit your report and continue just being awesome, awesome steward. So my address, email address is there below. It's just the volunteer@nisquallylandtrust.org. Yeah, and if that's not you decided this at this time, being a site steward maybe is not something you can do, there are lots of other opportunities with us. We have restoration work parties every Wednesday throughout the year, and usually 2 Saturdays a month. So anytime, our calendar on our website has all that listed. The signups are usually will take you to an external link to Eventbrite, and you sign up and reserve your spot. Most normal years that are not COVID, we have a conservation dinner and auction. So some of that stuff is TBD right now. Nature walk series, we like to do that. We're hoping to be able to start those back soon, even if it's in just small numbers. So that's spring, summer, fall. You can volunteer to help us with one, or you can attend. And then special webinars like today and other ones that we do. This is more of a workshop, but we are going to have some webinars and different informational things too. So you're always welcome to just participate from home on your computer too in those. So all of that at the events information can be found at nisquallylandtrust.org and specifically at our calendar. So I think that's it. Yes. So I'm going to stop my share here and we can go to answering some questions. Let's see.
I was muted. This is the end of our scheduled program. So if people want to hang around to hear these questions answered or ask new questions, feel free. But if you need to or want to head out, yeah, that's the end. Thank you so much. You can follow us on social media, Instagram and Facebook at Nisqually Land Trust. Email Susanna with any other questions. Keep an eye out for that survey. Yeah, and we hope to see you around sometime in the field. Yeah, so question in the chat. If you choose a site to steward, can you visit other sites as well? Yes. Many of our site stewards have more than one site. And even if you don't want to be an official steward for a site, most of our sites or many of our sites are open to the public to visit and walk around. So if you want to see somewhere, just, let us know and we can give you directions, show you a site. Yeah, we welcome site stewards to visit other sites than just their official stewarding site. Next question, is bank fishing allowed from NLT properties? Technically, yeah, we don't own the river. So as long as you're complying with, state and like federal fishing guidelines, but it's not something we really advertise as an activity. Are there properties to visit sites? Are there opportunities to visit sites more frequently, as in monthly? Yes. We ask that our site stewards go out 4 times a year, quarterly, but you're welcome to go out as much as you want. So if you want to go out every week, every month, you're allowed to go out as much as you can. As a site steward, you don't need to, except for your initial orientation, you don't need to be accompanied by a staff member or anything like that. So yeah, you're welcome to go out as you want to. Thank you for presentation. Look forward to being part of NLT. Can a site have multiple stewards, and can you connect site stewards from the same area? Yes, many of our sites, probably most of them, have multiple site stewards. You know, even if you're going out on the same day or right next, you know, the day after another steward, still helpful, because people are going to notice different things. And yeah, we have some stewards that, at least before COVID, like stewarded together. We have at times managed like a Google Doc with information about that. I don't think our Google Doc has been super active recently, or our site steward Google Drive, but yeah, we could help you get connected with people from your site. And do all sites have a management plan? Yeah, we can share that information with you if you want, once you are oriented to a site. Are there sites in more need of stewards than others? Yes. Our Yelm shoreline protected area, it has quite a few stewards, but it's somewhere where there is a lot of public access, and just like a lot of small parcels kind of scattered throughout the area. So that's a site that we always love to have more site stewards on. Yeah, some of our Mount Rainier Gateway properties, not the same issue with public access, but just because of location, there's not very many active stewards, but a lot of property. So if you like hanging out in the mountains, or if you live up in the Ashford area, that could be a site. But really, all of our sites could use more stewards. We can never have too many stewards. What else? Will you send a link to the PowerPoint presentation? Would love to have the great plant and bird pics. Yeah, if you want that, maybe send Susanna an email and we can share the PowerPoint with you. It's a pretty big presentation, so it's hard to email, but we could probably share it over maybe like Google Drive. And like you probably already know, this has been recorded. So if you want the recording, we can send it to you, or maybe we'll post it to our YouTube in an edited version, so maybe a little shorter. Yeah, any other questions? Things people want to say? Since there's less of you, you can unmute and talk if you would like.
So I see the one question, our family and friends welcome to join you. I think, did we answer that one? Yes, family and friends can join you. So yeah, we often have stewards that bring a friend with them, because it's always good to have someone out on the land with you. You're not out there by yourself. And we have one steward that often brings like almost like a different friend every time. So lots of fun to get out there. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments, anything?
Great. Yeah, thank you all for coming. It's been a good time. Good morning.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
All right. Chris, are you okay with if someone asks for the bird presentation? That's your presentation. Are you okay with that being shared?
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. Again, we take, Kirsten and I took all those photos, so if you end up using them somewhere else, just make sure to give us credit.
Sure, of course. Thank you so much. That was so great. I loved that presentation.
All right, well, I think I'm gonna end the meeting. If anybody has any questions, email Susanna.
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Take care. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
It was great.
Thank you.